Welcome to this first video of 2026. Do you recognise this aerial view of 1920s Norwich? I'll tell you where this is shortly. This video is effectively a walk through 1920s Norwich with current comparisons, with a few random pictures which don't quite fit into the walk at the end. We'll begin in London Street, onto Gentleman's Walk and along to the Haymarket, then into Orford Place, St Stephen's and Coburg Street, along Queen's Road, Finkelegate, Burr Street, Golden Ball Street, Castle Meadow, and end at the top of Prince of Wales Road. So we begin here in London Street, and the 1920s equivalent we would be looking at Garland's on the left, and on the right Cayley's Milliners, a type of store which I never associated with the name Cayley's. More about Cayley's later. Moving now into Gentleman's Walk, all I can say at this point is watch out for that tram! The policeman in the foreground is clearly not too perturbed. Boston's clothiers advertising on the side of the tram was in or near Farmers Avenue, possibly at Boston House in Orford Street. This is Hay Hill as we see it in 2026, with the Forum in the background and St Peter Mancroft on the right. This was the view exactly 100 years earlier, with the Reliance Garage, Free Trade pub and a toy shop in the background. Looking into Hay Hill from Briggs Street looks like this. The current view has Mountain Warehouse in the foreground and St Peter Mancroft behind those trees. In the 1920s this site was occupied by Burton's and the Haymarket Cinema. Into Orford Place now, where we are looking at the former Debenhams store. In the 1920s we would have seen the tramway centre here with a shelter in front of what was then Curl's store. Now into St Stephen's Street, with this being the current view, and the Marks and Spencer's building on the right unchanged in 100 years. Much has been demolished on St Stephen's Street though, which is now much wider, with traffic limited to buses, taxis and bikes. At the far end of St Stephen's Street is Coburg Street, with Chantry Place on the left hand side. The structure being built in 1920 was not a car park, it would be part of Cayley's chocolate factory, and this is the answer to the question about the aerial view from the beginning of the video. This building is seen completed here in 1928. From here we'll quickly zip along Queen's Road to Finkelegate and what is now Roti, previously the New Inn, with this an earlier incarnation of that former pub. We'll now go through Finkelegate and pop out on Burr Street, where looking back at the corner we'd see this building in 1926, now part of the Notre Dame School. Ninham & Son, baking powder manufacturers, although technically it had changed its name to Dakins by this time. A little further towards the city centre we would find these vehicles in the 1920s. They belonged to Fit Brothers and were located the equivalent of here in 2026. However, Fit Brothers premises were a little nearer still to the city centre, here in fact, and if you look carefully you can see their name in the brickwork at the top of the building. Fit Brothers provided services such as furniture removals, undertakers, coaches and buses. This is on the opposite side of the road and is on the corner of Horns Lane, the site of the George IV pub in the 1920s, which closed in 1962. This is Bonds, now John Lewis, but I'm not attempting an equivalent photo with it as I'm not sure on what part of the site this building was located. So we move on to Golden Ball Street. This is a general 2026 view of the street compared to a narrower street scene from the 1920s. A little further along is Prospect House, and on the corner of this access point was the Golden Ball pub, seen in 1926 with Rising Sun Lane heading off into the distance. By cutting down Farmers Avenue we end up on Castle Meadow, seen like this in 2026, but in the process of being widened in 1926. Go around the castle, and this is how Castle Meadow now looks, and this is what this same area looked like before the widening took place. Head into Agricultural Hall Plain, and this building has recently become part of the Norwich University of the Arts. But in 1926 this was the predecessor building on this site, shortly to be replaced. It was Barclays Bank, having previously been Gurney's Bank before an 1896 merger. Now let's just jump around a bit for a few random comparisons with 100 years ago. This is Whitefriars in 2026, and 100 years ago it looked like this, much narrower, and was actually an extension of Cowgate. This is a view from Caro Bridge in 2026, and down there was the original Caro Bridge, a continuation of the original route of Caro Road, which went behind the current football stadium. This picture dates from 1920. In 1923 the current Caro Bridge was opened, looking like it had a far smoother surface than we see in 2026. Alongside Barrack Street we currently see this fence, but this was the original site of the Sportsman pub before it relocated across the street and is now a branch of My Dentist. Talking about Sportsman, this is a Norwich City Football Club team of 1925, seen at the Nest, a current equivalent view of this location looking like this, now part of Bertram Way. Finally, two shots of activities on Norwich Aerodrome in 1927, which was located on what is now Heartsease Estate. Hope you enjoyed this look back at the Norwich of 100 years ago from the standpoint of 2026.